Welcome to WT History. In this series, we list all the major events that happened in the world in a year, starting from 1776 to 2024. On January 9th, the Teutonic Menor Corps is founded in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This cultural society promotes German traditions, music, and community life, reflecting the large wave of German immigration into the United States during the mid-19th century. Just 11 days later, on January 20th, the North Carolina General Assembly charters the Atlantic and North Carolina Railroad. Its route connects Goldsboro through New Bern to the seaport of Morehead City, boosting trade and development in the region. On February 11th, San Francisco lights up in a whole new way. The San Francisco Gas Company installs 86 coal gas lamps, marking the first time major streets in the city are illuminated by gaslight. 2 days later, on February 13th, William Walker, the controversial American adventurer, faces defeat as Mexican troops force him and his forces to retreat to Sonora. On February 14th, Texas is officially connected by telegraph to the rest of the United States. A new line between New Orleans and Marshall, Texas, brings faster communication to the frontier. On March 20th, two major milestones occur. First, the Boston Public Library opens its doors to the public, becoming the first large, free municipal library in the nation. On that same day, in Ripon, Wisconsin, anti-slavery activists formed the Republican Party in response to the Kansas-Nebraska Act. This political party will go on to shape American politics for generations. On April 16th, tragedy strikes as the United States packet ship Powhatan wrecks off the coast of New Jersey, killing more than 200 people. On May 30th, the Kansas-Nebraska Act becomes law. It creates the Kansas Territory and the Nebraska Territory, repeals the Missouri Compromise, and leaves the decision of slavery up to popular vote. This controversial law pushes the nation further towards civil war. On June 10th, the very first class graduates from the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis, Maryland. That same month, the Grand Excursion begins. Prominent citizens from the eastern states travel from Chicago to Rock Island by train, then journey up the Mississippi River to St. Paul, Minnesota by steamboat, showcasing the growing reach of American transportation networks. On July 4th, James Ambrose, cutting patents improvements to the wet plate collodion process, paving the way for ambrotype photography. Just 2 days later, on July 6th, the Republican Party holds its very first official convention in Jackson, Michigan. On August 19th, tragedy unfolds in the West. Lieutenant John Lawrence Grattan leads a group of 29 American soldiers and one interpreter against a Lakota Sioux village after a dispute over a stray cow. His small command is annihilated, marking the beginning of decades of conflict on the Great Plains. On September 27th, disaster strikes at sea again. The American paddle steamer SS Arctic collides with the smaller French vessel SS Vesta off Newfoundland. Around 320 people perish, including many prominent Americans, in what becomes one of the worst maritime disasters of the century. On October 1st, Aaron Lufkin Dennison's watch company relocates to Waltham, Massachusetts, becoming the Waltham Watch Company. This pioneer of precision watch manufacturing will influence timekeeping worldwide. From October 9th to 11th, American diplomats in Europe draft the Ostend Manifesto. It argues that the United States should purchase or even seize Cuba from Spain, stirring international controversy. Around this same time, Bryant and Stratton College is founded as a business institute in the United States, offering practical education for a growing workforce. Also, Professor Benjamin Silliman of Yale University achieves a breakthrough by successfully distilling petroleum into its components, a step that paves the way for the modern oil industry. Meanwhile, in Connecticut, the Waterbury Clock Company is founded within the Benedict and Burnham Manufacturing Company. This timepiece department will later become the Timex Group, one of the most recognized watchmakers in the world. On January 6th, literature meets legend as the fictional detective Sherlock Holmes is said to have been born, according to later writings by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Just 2 weeks later, on January 21st, tragedy strikes Ireland. The iron clipper RMS Taylor runs aground on her maiden voyage from Liverpool to Australia. At least 300 of the 650 passengers die. On March 1st, the British steamship City of Glasgow departs Liverpool for America with 480 people. It vanishes without a trace, never to be found. That same month, German psychologist Friedrich Eduard Benecke disappears, and 2 years later, his remains are discovered in a canal near Charlottenburg. On March 11th, the Crimean War heats up as a Royal Navy fleet sails from Britain under Vice Admiral Charles Napier, launching the Åland War. On March 27th, the United Kingdom declares war on Russia, followed 1 day later, on March 28th, by France. The Crimean War has officially begun. On April 1st, Charles Dickens begins publishing hard times in his magazine Household Words, highlighting the struggles of industrial society. On May 18th, the Catholic University of Ireland is founded, a forerunner to University College, Dublin. On June 21st, during the Battle of Beaumarsand, British sailor Charles Davis Lucas famously throws a live shell overboard before it explodes, saving his crew. For his bravery, he later receives the very first Victoria Cross. On July 17th, the Bienio Progresista coup takes place in Spain, beginning a brief period of liberal reform. On August 9th, Johann becomes King of Saxony upon the death of his brother. A week later, on August 16th, Russian forces on Beaumarsand Island in Åland surrender to Anglo-French troops. On August 27th, English lawyer Alfred Wills leads an expedition that makes the first ascent of the Wetterhorn in Switzerland, marking the start of the Golden Age of Alpinism. From August 31st to September 8th, London is ravaged by a cholera epidemic, killing over 10,000 people. Dr. John Snow traces one deadly outbreak to a contaminated water pump on Broad Street, proving that cholera spreads through water and laying the foundation of modern epidemiology. On September 20th, the Battle of Alma becomes the first major land engagement of the Crimean War. The French-British alliance secures a victory. On October 6th, the Great Fire of Newcastle and Gateshead erupts in England, triggered by a massive explosion, devastating the area. On October 25th, the Battle of Balaclava takes place. The Allies win, but the infamous charge of the Light Brigade sees only 200 of 700 cavalrymen survive, turning into a symbol of both bravery and tragedy. On November 5th, the Battle of Inkerman is fought, where Russian forces suffer defeat against the Allies. On November 14th, a great storm strikes the Black Sea, wrecking 19 British and 2 French ships supporting the Crimean War, killing at least 287 men. In November, Florence Nightingale and 38 volunteer nurses arrive at Selumier Barracks in Scutari, tending to British soldiers wounded in the Crimean War. Her efforts transform modern nursing. Meanwhile, in Sweden, the Mute Rebellion breaks out, sparking local unrest. On December 8th, Pope Pius IX proclaims the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, declaring that the Virgin Mary was conceived without original sin. Around the same time, in Poland, Ignacy Łukasiewicz drills the world's first oil well at Boberka near Krosno County, a breakthrough in energy history. In Iceland, trade restrictions loosen as commerce is open to merchants beyond the Danes. Russia establishes a fort at the modern site of Almaty in Central Asia. And in France, the luxury fashion house Louis Vuitton is founded, destined to become a global icon. On January 4th, Captain William McDonald discovers the McDonald Islands in the southern Indian Ocean while aboard the Samarang. On February 17th, Britain recognizes the independence of the Orange Free State in southern Africa. 6 days later, the Orange River Convention officially declares it independent. On March 1st, in Mexico, the Plan de Ayutla calls for liberal reforms and the removal of President Antonio López de Santa Anna. 2 days later, on March 3rd, Australia celebrates progress with its first telegraph line, linking Melbourne to Williamstown in Victoria. On March 24th, Venezuela abolishes slavery, marking a significant step toward freedom and equality. On March 31st, United States Commodore Matthew Perry signs the Convention of Kanagawa with Japan, opening the ports of Shimoda and Hakodate to American trade and ending centuries of Japanese isolation. That same month, the British East India Company annexes the Indian princely state of Jhansi under the doctrine of lapse, increasing British control. From May 5th to 15th, violent clashes known as the Hokkien Teochew riots erupt in Singapore between rival Chinese groups. On May 27th, American diplomat Robert McLean arrives in the Taiping capital aboard the USS Susquehanna, seeking relations with the rebel government. On July 7th, India's first cotton mill, the Bombay Spinning and Weaving Company, is established by Kawasji Nanaboy Davar and Associates, marking the rise of industrial textile production in India. On July 13th, Mohammed Said Pasha becomes the Wali of Egypt and Sudan, succeeding his nephew Abbas. 6 days later, on July 19th, Charles Wood sends his famous dispatch to Lord Dalhousie, urging sweeping reforms in India's educational system. On October 17th, The Age newspaper is in Melbourne, Australia, destined to become a leading daily. On November 17th, the Suez Canal Company is formed in Egypt, beginning the dream of linking the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. On December 3rd, the Eureka Stockade Rebellion breaks out in Ballarat, Victoria. Miners protesting against high license fees clash with colonial troops in what becomes a key event in Australian democracy. Finally, on December 10th, Said Pasha formally abolishes slavery in Egypt, advancing social reform in the region. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to WT History for more yearly recaps from the past.